Three more theories to be tackled today. We have muted group theory, priming, and proxemics. Now let's study first the muted group theory. Cherish Crameray conducted a study to research the way women were depicted in cartoons. She found out that women hardly appeared in cartoons, and when they did, they were almost always meek or apologetic. Male cartoons, on the other side, spoke with conviction and strong statements. Female cartoons spoke nicely and were described with frilly pretty words. Cramery realized that women live in a world where language has been constructed by men, and as a result, women's thought and opinions are disregarded. And because of men, the dominant group control communication. People with little power who have trouble giving voice to their perceptions because they must re encode their thoughts to make them understood in the public sphere. So they must alter the way they communicate or they become invisible. Cramery described muted groups as the black holes in someone else's universe. Women's expressions were acceptable at home but not in public. Women are not as free or as able as men or to say what they wish because the words and the norms for their use have been formulated by the dominant group, which is the men. Muted group theory is a critically theory because it is concerned with power and how it is used against people. While critical theories can separate the powerful and the powerless any number of ways, this theory chooses to bifurcate the power spectrum into men and women. Muted group theory begins with the premise that language is culture bound, and because men have more power than women, men have more influence over the language, resulting in language with a male bias. Men create the words and meaning for the culture, allowing expression of their ideas. Women, on the other hand, are left out of this meaning creation and left without a means to express that which is unique to them. That leaves women as a muted group. Muted group theory states that because language is man made, women remain reduced and excluded. And because of words and norms have been created by men, women are disadvantaged in public. As women become less muted and more vocal, the dominant position of males in society will diminish. Muted group theory does not claim that these differences are based in biology. Instead, the theory claims that men risk losing their dominant position if they listen to women, incorporate their experiences in the language, and allow women to be equal partners in language use and creation. Language is about power, and men have it. Gatekeepers are editors and other arbiters of a culture who determine which books, essays, poetry, plays, films, scripts, and others will appear in the mass media. According to Cramery, women were locked out of the publishing business until 1970. Women lacked influence on mass media and were not often found properly represented in history. Men, being the gatekeepers, were able to use the media for their advantage, all while muting females. The muted group theory explains the cause of muteness by a certain group of population, especially of that of women in the society. The theory upholds a gender perspective where the male is the dominant class. The women live with the attitude where her opinions remain muted when spoken and mostly choose to adopt with the situation. The attitudes of the male who are the breadwinners are considered dominant than the women who rely on them. The stage old tradition made a whole new power division in the society. Let's take a look at this illustration. The differential capacities of the dominant group constructed by solid ground while muted group handles less power authority towards perception of reality. The shallow differences encompasses the level of degree between the two groups. We can compare it to the power of authority of women versus men. When a woman comes to social space, they are facing the most abusive language because women are considering as a less power than a man. But men are taking more advantage by using the existing male dominant power in the social space and protect themselves from these abusive languages. In our society, most of the abusive languages denotes feminine and very few for men. Let's take a closer look to the different hypotheses underlying this theory. Women find it hard to express them when compared to men. This is because the language is made to be used by men. Next, we have it is easier for women to understand that men mean more easily than the men can understand what women mean when communicating. This is because women have learned to encode and understand the men's language. Women communicate with each other using a media that is not accepted by men. When women talk, men, while often be heard saying they are nagging, gossiping, doing nothing, women talk nonsense and all other words that are used to describe what women say to each other. But when men talk, it is called a man talk or business meetings and so on. And last hypothesis, women are less satisfied with communication. This can be illustrated on a date. The man is one who is likely to bring up the topic of discussion, and the woman is forced to feign interest in it. Men will always want to control a conversation course and mute other topics that women bring up. MGT also covers different assumptions. First assumption is that women's perception of the world is shaped by different experiences in the society. These experiences are as a result of them performing different tasks from what their male counterparts do. The second assumption is that men politically control power. They use this power to suppress the ideas proposed by women and block women from gaining public acceptance. And the third assumption is that in order for women to be accepted into the public sphere in areas such as leadership, they have to convert their ideas, conversation, speech, and actions to be conformity to the language of men. With the way technology is advancing, Karamari's vision for the next step of her theory is the movement into online communication interaction. Her idea is that online a person can be genderless, making communication uncontrolled by the muted group theory to abolish the norm of sexes getting different treatment according to their significance in society. So, to be treated other than mindless helpers to the dominant group, which is men, women must change the way they are perceived by men to be accepted by men. When they are accepted, then they gain the respect of men and are treated like they belong to the dominant group. The way this is done is that a woman must adopt the characteristics of male, using their language the way it was intended by the dominant group and copying their mannerisms. With advances through technology, the internet has provided us with the environment and means, though with Kramer's vision of the need to lose the female mannerisms to be accepted. With the new networking tools, Web 2.0 provided us with we can now create a new unbiased driven characters with sites like Second Life and games like World of Facebook. The dominant group, however, despise this idea. They are terrified at the idea that the power could shift even the smallest degree so that muted groups' proposals could be seen as important or even more important than the current dominant group. Hating the idea of even the possibility that Kramer could be right, they would never accept that women have their own personal language. To the dominant group, all they are concerned with is power and how to use it against people. Kramer believes that women are the Western culture's muted group of our culture. They are the repressed group driven into illiteracy through the actions of the dominant male group of our culture, creating the language we are forced to use daily through the raw fact that there is no alternative means to communication. To be accepted and pull themselves out from the four depths of male created recession, they must gain the respect of males through copying them and gaining acceptance into their dominant group. Cramery hopes that this could be overcome through the use of technology, changing our culture from dominant and muted groups to one large genderless group. Here's a conclusion of muted group theory. The reason this theory is important in society is because it raises issues about the female culture, how they are formed through their experiences, and since their experiences differ from male, they shape differing norms than males, and since males' norms are society norms, females not fit in. Consider the overview of MGT. Theory based on the idea that dominant cultures systematically oppress minority culture through the use of language. What is your insight about the passage? For our next theory, let's talk about priming. If you have ever heard a new word for the first time in your life and then suddenly notice it popping up everywhere from the news to your grandmother's dinner conversation, you know that the human brain can be primed to notice things that it ordinarily would completely overlook. The same thing happens when the press begins spending time on an issue that might ordinarily simmer on a back burner. Once the issue becomes news, it tends to become relevant. When the public begins to view candidates in light of a particular issue that has been brought up by the media, even though it was not a consideration prior to its introduction, it is an example of priming effect. For example, in spite of the fact that no one cared about whether the candidates recycled just a month earlier, once the issue of home recycling is brought to the forefront, it can have a huge impact in determining who wins an election. Further, the more coverage an issue receives, the more of an impact it has on the opinions the public forms about those at the center of the attention. At its most powerful, those who subscribes to priming theory believe that the media has the power to control how audiences interpret new information. This is because they believe that humans filter new information through a filter form partially of prior information. New information cannot be viewed outside the context of a previous information. People who try to mold public opinion often attempt to do so by manipulating the information the public receives, most often by introducing information strategically to influence the way future information will be received. By emphasizing some issues and ignoring others, the media in particular may be able to determine which issues will have a bearing on an election and which will not. Priming is a concept through which the media effects among the people are enhanced by providing a basic perception. Human minds take decisions based on the preconceptions that are already been stored in our memory. The memories are stored as a form of nodes and they are interconnected effectively and mostly act as a frame of reference to the decisions that we make. Priming enables the audience to evaluate the situation to conclude how effective the media has been in order to make a decision by providing a frame of reference. Thus, media creates an influence among people to make judgment or a decision. Priming has been particularly evaluated during the elections and while choosing the right candidate, particularly when it comes to politics, where people lack the knowledge concerning political matters. They base their decisions on the information from the media, which actually influences their decision making on whom to elect. This theory was put forward by Iyengar Peters and Kender in 1982 and labeled it as the priming effect. Priming is an important concept in media effects, as agenda settings bring out the only importance of the issue. Priming offers explanation on how the information from the media are stored in the human mind and how it influences in making decisions. Media affect the judgment or behavior by stimulating the associating thoughts, which are caused due to the mental relationships created inside the memory. The media effects have impact on particular aspects while ignoring the others. The prominence shown in the media for any issues becomes a major factor in creating an impact in a person's judgment. This can cause to learn concern on the more important issue. For example, the news that is flashing on the headline on a television or the report coming on the front page of the newspaper are more likely to create an impact than the less prominent news coming subsequently. Where did this theory originated? The concept of planting an idea into the minds of the people and allowing that idea to dominate all further debate is not new. The ancient Greek demagogue Demosthenes used it to paralyze the Athenian political machine, essentially handling the democracy over the conquering armies of Alexander of Macedon. Cicero used it in Rome to manipulate juries and to drive a thorn deeply into the side of Julius Caesar. However, what had been considered simply crafty politics became the theory in 1982, when Eyangar, Peters, and Kinder studied the theory and gave it a name. Now, as in the early days of Demosthenes, priming is believed to work because members of the public have limited knowledge about politics, and they tend to focus selectively on portions of what they do know when they make voting decisions. They base their decisions upon the information that is in the forefront in their minds. Demosthenes knew that the issue he kept before the people in the days leading up to a vote would be the ones they would consider salient when making their decisions. To further understand the priming concept, I'll read some related examples. Jacobs and Safiro conducted an in depth analysis in the 1960 Kennedy campaign for president and determined that it was a modern example of priming in action. The Kennedy campaign was the first to use public opinion surveys. Kennedy's campaign managers kept up a continuous evaluation of the political climate in the nation and attempted to influence it as well as respond to it. Based on their study of the campaign, Jacobs and Safiro determined that priming can be a powerful political tool to influence voters' assessments of candidates. The media easily influence children and their behavior can be based on the contents shown in the television. For example, a child tends to enact the qualities of their favorite character in movies and tend to display their characteristics. And also, the government can highlight a particular issue through the media, ignoring issues which might be less or more important. For example, government highlight issues concerning economic development, ignoring environmental issues which are equally important. As the media covers the issue primed by the government, the people are influenced by the prominent news, ignoring others as obscure. And as an application of priming, it is used to evaluate the media effects among the people. As it is a media central world, the study regarding the media effects are vital. Researchers are implemented applying the priming concept to understand the impact of TV programs and violent behavior among the viewers. Even during the elections, the campaigns are used to emphasize certain issues, and how it influences the people in choosing the right candidate has been observed by applying this concept. For our last theory, here are the viewpoints about proxemics. Consider the theory scenario. 20 study abroad students gather for a conference at an international university. The students arrive in groups by nationality and spend some time talking about before the conference. The Japanese students converse softly in one corner of the room. Though they stand close together, they carefully maintain a personal distance from each other. The American students, in contrast, stand in a loop knit group, talking loudly and gesturing enthusiastically. A few Italian youths are seen greeting each other with pats, claps hands and hugs. Some even lean against each other during the conversation. As the three groups begin to mingle, some awkward shuffling takes place. A Japanese student winces at American's booming voice. Another American backs away as an Italian encroaches on his personal space. One of the Italians strains to clearly hear a Japanese girl who is speaking to him. By the end of the conference, all of the students are exhausted. Dealing with proxemics has worn them out. Proxemics is a theory of nonverbal communication that explains how people perceive and use space to achieve communication goals. Introduced by anthropologist Edward T. Hall in 1960s, the theory emerged from studies of animal behavior conducted in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Just as animals use urine and physical posturing to define their territory, Hall posited so do humans use personal space and concrete objects to establish theirs. Proxemics is one of five nonverbal communication theories, the others being semiotics, which is the sign language, kinesics, body language, haptics, which is touch, and chronemics, which is time. One of the things to consider when determining how much space an individual needs is to recognize that this distance is intentionally chosen by individuals based on factors like prior experiences, cultural backgrounds, and the kind of relationship they have with someone. For example, an individual might be comfortable being extremely close to a romantic partner, but may lean away when a work colleague gets too close. Being attentive to people's boundaries can help give clues about a person's personal preference for distance. In his book, The Silent Language, Edward Hall outlined the following ideas behind proxemic theory. Number one, there are four types of distances people keep. That's intimate, which is 0 to 18 inches, personal, which is 18 inches to 4 feet. Next is social, which is 4 to 10 feet, and public, over 10 feet. Number two, the distances outlined are those deliberately chosen by individuals. Forced closeness does not factor in proxemics. Number three, proxemic behavior is learned mostly from observing others rather than from explicit instruction, which is why personal distance and physical contact varies by culture. Number four, the physical distance between communicators indicates the type of relationship they have. Body angles, touch, and eye contact further reveal the familiarity between people. And lastly, Americans generally prefer 18 inches of personal space. Hall believed that proxemics could not only help eliminate relationships and communication goals, but also explain other cultural and anthropological phenomena, such as the organization of towns and living spaces. Furniture, walls, streets, buildings, and fences are arranged in ways that delineate one's territory, whether for living, working, or meeting others. Territories are designed to provide comfort for their owners and produce anxiety within intruders. Even color is used to identify certain kinds of territories and the behavior expected from those who enter them. For instance, a bright purple sofa in a small apartment would encourage a fun, carefree attitude, while a pristine white sofa in the same apartment would indicate an owner who prefers formality and restraint. Restaurants painted in soothing pastels invite diners to linger over their meals. Those decorated with loud, obnoxious tones say, "Eat quickly and leave." There are four main kinds of territories in proxemics. Number one is body territory. It refers to the personal space or bubble that one maintains around their person. Number two is primary territory, which is one's home, vehicle, or other living space. Third is secondary territory, which is a structured place where entry is reserved for particular individuals and certain norms are expected, such as school, office, or church. Number four is public territory, an office space where anyone can come and go. such as park or shopping mall. Territories can overlap. For example, a book club might meet in a person's home. For the homeowner, the home is a primary territory. For the book club members, it's a secondary territory. Territories function as a way to protect their owner's comfort, interest, and possessions from unwelcome invaders. The correlation of proximity and anxiety. Encountering proxemic behavior different from one's own has been known to trigger anxiety or a fight or flight response. Researchers have conducted experiments that prove whenever an animal experiences a violation of its personal territory, it reacts by either running away or attacking the intruder. The same holds true for humans in most cases. The exemption comes in instances where people voluntarily give up their personal space to, for example, ride a crowded train or elevator. Research has shown that humans can put aside their personal discomfort to achieve certain goals day after day without becoming overtly anxious, hostile, or violent in the process. The key, researchers found, is withholding eye contact from others. Those who averted their eye while in close physical contact with strangers exhibited markedly less anxiety. Thus, eye contact plays a significant role in proxemics research. And for the cultural related types of proxemics, for the purposes of understanding how different people communicate nonverbally, Edward Hall separated cultures into two basic categories: contact and non contact. In contact cultures, physical touching between acquaintances is permitted and even necessary for establishing interpersonal relationships. Such cultures include Arab, Italian, French, Latin America, and Turkish. For non contact cultures, touching is reserved for only the most intimate acquaintances. Examples include the US, Norway, Japan, and most Southeast Asian cultures. British linguist and businessman Richard D. Lewis later expanded upon this idea by outlining three specific types of cultures based upon communication styles. Number one is linear active. This is cool, logical, and decisive. Speakers tend to be direct and occasionally impatient, but otherwise remain reserved and deal mostly in facts. Examples include the US and most Northern European culture. Number two is multi active, warm, and impulsive. Speakers communicate enthusiastically, readily express emotion, and prefer personal stories to facts. They tend to interrupt during conversation and display impatience more openly. Examples include Brazil, Mexico, and Greece. Reactive, accommodating, and non confrontational. Speakers value decorum and diplomacy over facts or emotions. They're usually very patient listeners who remain reserved in their body language and expressions. Examples include Vietnam, China, and Japan. Lewis' cultural classification is known as the Lewis model. It even includes a test individuals can take to identify their cultural communication style. How can we measure proxemics? Researchers must consider many factors when studying proxemics. Edward Hall, for instance, measured posture, body angle, physical distance, touch, eye contact, thermal heat, smell, and vocal volume when defining the different types of distances people create between themselves and others. Though some of Hall's successors discounted heat, smell, and volume as somewhat extraneous, they discovered several additional variables that often affect conversational distance. They are age, gender, social status, conversation topic, available space, and environmental noise. Such a reality begs many questions. For instance, were two women whispering in the corner because they're close friends or because they are coworkers planning a surprise party to their boss? Would those strangers on the corner still be talking loudly if there weren't a siren going off one block away? As a result of so many variables, researchers now treat distance as a part of integrated system of communication rather than a standalone phenomenon. They also select which measures to include and isolate the variables for individual analysis. The application related to this theory. Proxemics research have proved useful in several different fields. Film analysts have discovered that by decreasing the distance between the camera and the actor, audiences become more emotionally attached to the actor's character. People in business have found that increasing face to face interactions between employees strengthens corporate culture. Perhaps its more important application, though, in the field of communication technology. Studies have shown that people naturally gravitate towards media in which proximity can be accurately stimulated in the virtual world. The greater the perceived proximity, the more successful and effective the technology becomes. Despite the popularity and usefulness of proxemics, some have criticized the theory. Critics says that proxemic theory promoted by Edward T. Hall makes sweeping generalizations and promotes cultural stereotypes. They also says that several of his claims concerning proxemic behavior remain unsubstantiated. However, proxemics continue to aid people in understanding nonverbal behavior and in communicating effectively with members of different cultures.